This video is sponsored by Fantic. I'm a bit of a collector when it comes to old school metal Warhammer 40,000 models. I love the history of these old figs, and a lot of old school Games Workshop came and went fast. Most of the factions have seen pretty consistent updates pretty quickly forever, but one faction that has not are the Sisters of Battle, now called the Adeptus Sororitas. I have quite a collection of old metal Sisters of Battle, almost the entire range. There's just a couple of things I'm missing and a few things that I would like some more duplicates of. But these miniatures hit the scene in I think 1998, and that's all that the Sisters got for for over 20 years, because these models were it. I think Games Workshop was maybe a little embarrassed that they made a girl faction, but these models were so popular that the Sisters stayed a popular faction in 40k for the next 20 years until late 2019, when Games Workshop finally updated the Sisters of Battle to a lovely new plastic range. I remember back in the day, the constant joke was that the Sisters of Battle were going to get squatted any day now because they had not seen a real expansion to their range. I think in 2004 the Repentia came out, but other than that, this was it. And people were kind of fine with that. These models remained incredibly popular, and I can see why. These are some of the best metal models that Games Workshop ever made. I want to rebuild Warhammer 40,000 2nd edition with the models from the era, but with the techniques from now. I want to see just how good these miniatures can look. One of the trickiest parts of collecting Old Hammer is figuring out what is there and comparing that to what I've managed to get my hands on. There were only ever 7 sculpts or Battle Sisters, and in my collection I've got a bunch, mostly duplicates. I also have a nice pair of Sister Superiors, and some Battle Sisters with special weapons, some Flamers, and some heavy Flamers. The Battle Sisters have a few different units that are essentially Battle Sister squads with different weapon loadouts, like Dominions and Retributor squads. I don't know exactly how they work yet, so I'm gonna hold off building the fancy guns for now. I also have a classic metal Saint Celestine, back from when she used to be a blonde. This model will be the flagship of this collection, but first I need to figure out how to paint them. Step 1 is getting off the old paint. I grabbed my ultrasonic cleaner filled with LA's Totally Awesome, and I threw in one of each Battle Sister sculpt. After 10 minutes in the bath, I pulled out some Sisters to see if the ultrasonic shaking was making any progress on loosening the paint. Luckily, it was coming off. Some of the figures were more tenacious than others. Whatever red paint the previous owner used was powerful, but I kept on scrubbing and re-soaking in the cleaner. I found a stiff plastic brush that helped to really scrub away the models. After a few soaks, a lot of the easy paint had already come off, but I had to go with the nuclear option, a jar of acetone. I have a lot of weird issues with stripping models. Sometimes one chemical works perfectly and other times it does absolutely nothing. I gave each Battle Sister a soak in the acetone, and it did help pull off the rest of the paint that the LA's Totally Awesome couldn't handle. Between these two goos, I was eventually able to scrape off and poke off every little bit of paint so that these figures were essentially like new. And now that they're like new, I can make them better than new. I looked around for any little flaws that I could fix. There were some instances of mold slippage, and my F2 master rotary tool with a fine grinding bit did a good job of smoothing out any flaws. Metal models need to be sanded. I found X-Acto blades will carve metal a little, but they leave flat chisel marks that look bad on a figure. Luckily, this was a much easier process thanks to today's sponsor, Fantic. Last year, Fantic sent me their F2 rotary tool, Master Edition, and it immediately became my go-to tool for grinding, drilling, polishing, carving, and much more. And now Fantic has a new version, the F2 Pro. It's slightly bigger, but it's still got that same lightweight, compact, wireless design that's easy to use on minis, even the hard-to-reach spots. And it has even more accessories than the F2, with over 55 different attachments to choose from, and with more power. It can sand and cut with ease. The large form factor also means a bigger battery, and it has an even larger power band than the Master, with slower and faster rotating speeds, and it has built-in LEDs which point directly at your work. Another Fantic tool I use constantly is the K2 Nano, a cordless drill tool that is compact and powerful, designed for drilling through resin, plastic, wood, and more with ease. It's made pinning feet and drilling out gun barrels an absolute breeze. And once I've made a mess, I can reach for the V8 Apex, a handheld vacuum cleaner that weighs less than a pound and sucks up all the messy leftovers in a jiffy. You can find the Amazon link below in the description, and if you use the code on screen, you can get an additional 7% off of that. That's 30% off in total. It's a great deal, so big thanks to Fantic for providing such an awesome rotary tool and the exclusive discount. With the bodies all taken care of, I decided to drill out the gun barrels. A harder task on metal models. I put a drill bit into my F2, and the speed helped me basically grind away the metal. I went slow, carving away into the business end of each bolter. Then I put a little hole through the side. These particular Battle Sister bolters were named the Godwin Diaz pattern, which was names taken from sculptors who worked for Games Workshop at the time. It was pretty nerve-wracking drilling the barrels because if I screw this up, that's kind of it. I guess I could maybe cut off the whole front and glue on some plastic card, but it would never match. Luckily, I was able to get through them all, and eventually, it was onto their feet. Metal models have a peg that's meant to fit into a slotted base. It's really hard to get metal feet to stand on a plastic base, but it's a challenge that I'm prepared for. So I clipped this off, grinding down the one long peg into 2 small tabs under each foot. I found a couple more little spots that could use some TLC, and some areas were so small I had to cut down my already tiny sanding twigs to get something that would actually fit. These Sisters minis had a whole life before reaching me, and I want them to be as perfect as they can possibly be. It's almost a ritual with old models. The work of getting them from whatever state they're in to like new, and then taking them from like new and getting them better than that. Although these models were pretty good, not too much mold slippage, not too many little seam lines, nothing too crazy to get rid of. These are just really nice. These are the best Old Hammer models I've ever worked on. And they're basically identical to the modern Sisters of Battle. Everything about them has been transferred from the old to the new, and not every faction is like that. Orcs have been through some major changes, Tyranids have been through like 3 major changes. Tau's about the same, but they have more anime mech suits. But these gals are exactly the modern plastic sisters, just a little smaller and a little squishier. Now that I got these guys all cleaned up, it's time to get them on some bases. And I'm not going with the classic retro 25mm bases that everything in Warhammer used to stand on. I think I'm going 32. I want these gals to be proper Sisters of Battle for modern Warhammer 40,000, with a little bit of a retro bent. I grabbed some Cobalt Keep magnet bases with the magnets and metal bodies. These will be some pretty heavy figures. After I sunk in my magnets, I thought about what kind of ground I want for my gals marching over. I feel like one of the things of the Sisters is the juxtaposition between the Sisters' beautiful armor and costume versus the horrible world that is 40k, so I want something ugly. I think a ruined battlefield will look nice. I grabbed some textured plastic sheet, we also sell some plastic sheet on EonsOfBattle.com, and I cut out some squares with a pair of scissors. I glued this on randomly to the base, and then I used my clippers to cut away the extra. Then I mixed up some milliput. I took some tiny blobs and I made some little piles to make the surface of my bases irregular. Squishing down the putty with a damn finger did a good job of smoothing out the edges. Once I was happy with my goop, I coated the surface of my bases with some sandy texture paste. I think this little bit of ground and metal will look good for my rank and file sisters, and for more elite units like my Dominions or St. Celestine, I'll go a lot harder with building up these bases. Once my texture paste was dry, I carefully sprinkled on some small pebbles and sand. And when I was happy with how it was laying, I dripped some ultra thin super glue over top. This seeps in between all the cracks and locks these bits down permanently. Now to actually attach my gals. I found putting a drop of blue paint on their tabs and then pressing these down onto the base gave me the perfect mark so I could drill some holes. The tabs are a little irregular, so I found a drill bit that was just a little bit thinner, and then I put on some thick super glue and shoved these down into the holes. I'm not worried at all about these models breaking. Now that the squad is standing, I grabbed some Citadel skulls and I sprinkled a few of these onto the bases. No 40k battlefield is complete without some inexplicably sun-bleached skulls. Finally, my models are standing, they are perfect and ready for some paint. I hit them all with a white prime. I've got my Battle Sisters all ready for paint, and even though these models are somewhat simple, like they're single pieces of metal, or I guess 2 pieces with the power plants, there's a lot going on. You got the armor, you got the robes, you got the shoulder pad, you got the bolter, you got the bob cut, and it's gonna be tricky finding a balance between all of those things to really make these models pop. Also, I'm kinda not feeling our Martyred Lady, which is the standard black and red, the classic Sororitas color pattern. I feel like I wanna do a little something different. This color scheme, the Order of the Sacred Rose, I feel like it looks pretty good. The white really shows off the armor well, but it's still kind of the standard Sisters colors, just swapped around a little. But then I saw this painting. This is a Sister of Battle. The blue-green shading of the white armor, the black boots, the dark saturated red. This looks really good. I started out by mixing some marine mist into matte white paint in my airbrush and I sprayed this on. This gave me a really cool look and I'm hoping sticks around in the recesses. Then to bring back some of the white, I sprayed some titanium ink from above. Then I hit all my sisters with a satin varnish in preparation for some precision washes. I want my cracks and crevices really vibrant but not dark. I mixed some plasmatic bolt with battleship gray, then I took a long bristle paintbrush and I dripped this into all the corners and recesses. From the illustration, I thought the blue shading looked so good, and it was so much more interesting than just black and white. I really want the armor to read as porcelain. I'm going for pretty. It took a while to find every little spot to drip this paint into, but eventually I had some bluish sisters. And now that my shading is perfect, I need to brighten up the white overall. I took matte white and I started to highlight up, putting this on thick on all the raised details. The fleur-de-lis, the Imperialis, the gloves, the leg armor. I really spent some time on this, it's the most important part of the sisters. Once I was happy with all the armor, it was time for the boots. In the artwork, all the boots are black, so I grabbed some grim black speed paint and I slobbered this on full strength. and in a few spots I added a second coat so that the boots were truly black in the recesses. Then for some highlights, I mixed ash gray and white together to get a few little highlights to make these boots look shiny. I thinned down the grim black a little bit more and I put this over their tubes. I don't know what these do, they're clearly not for breathing, so I guess it's power cables? I don't know, but with that done, I have a good chunk of these minis finished. Now for another color, red, but a dark, dark red. I started with Blancheberry mixed with just a little bit of black paint, and I base coated all of the cloth. This was nerve-wracking because I really don't want to spill it onto the white armor, but going slow, I was able to get it where it needed to be. Then I glazed on some more pure Blancheberry, and then I started mixing in some fiery vermilion. I used this very sparingly to brighten up my dark red color. I did many layers, building up the highlights until there were just a few tiny edge highlights of pure fiery vermilion. In a few spots I did make mistakes with the red, so I had to go back and fix it. A lot of their little ecclesiarchy symbols got splashed, so I had to clean these up. Part of me wants to paint these gold, but I really want it to look like the painting, and you don't get that by adding other colors that aren't there, so I left these white. My battle sisters are coming along great. I'm painting them in the colors of the Order of the Sacred Rose, which is white armor, black clothing, and red bolters. Now I've gotten that slightly wrong, but I was working off of a different reference image for the Order of the Sacred Rose, and it's always a little bit of a risk to go off of a painting, because a 2D illustration can have so much more going on to give it the mood that it has, and something is always lost in translation when you take that and you put it onto a 3D surface, a miniature. But I feel like it worked really well. The kind of porcelain vibe of the tealy white is really nice. The best thing about these figures is the ornamentation, and you can't go brighter than white. It shows off the figures so nicely. The actual colors for the Order of the Sacred Rose are a little bit boring, and I poured through like every single Sister of Battle color scheme under the sun. And this one picture just really spoke to me, and I'm really glad that I chose it for these figures. These sisters are really coming along, and I think the next order of business is gonna be the faces. And this might be where it all falls apart. These are some tiny faces, and I'm gonna do my best. I started out doing a base coat with Barbarian Flesh, and I ended up adding just a little bit of Blancheberry for a little more warmth. Then I started highlighting with just Barbarian Flesh. Then to brighten up my colors without losing the warmth, I started mixing in Ice Yellow. These faces are okay, a little rough, but I tried to highlight as best as I could, focusing on their cheekbones. And I tried to give them all a little bit of red lipstick, using Blancheberry as a base coat and then just a tiny drop of fiery vermilion for a highlight. Then for the eyes, I base coated these in black. These eyes are microscopic, so it was almost impossible to dot them. It took multiple tries on each sister. I was feeling pretty good about the faces, and I even painted on a little fleur-de-lis on each cheek. These were just tiny plus signs, but it got the point across. With the faces painted, they're really starting to look done. Next up, the hair. For this, I switched black to grim black. The texture on the hair is really nice, so 2 coats of grim black gave me some nice looking wigs. They must be wigs, right? Do Adeptus Sororitas go to the salon before each battle? And you know what else always looks its best? That's right, our website. On EonsOfBattle.com, we have all sorts of hobby goodies: Gamer Grass Tufts, Great Head Studio Bits for your Space Marines, Army Painter paints, brushes, base and cork, ultra thin and ultra thick superglue, and we've got terrain. It's the best way to support us doing what we do by getting a membership. Each month, members get a credit good for any one terrain pack I've ever made, or the brand new one. This August, we have created the Deadly Swamp Bits Pack, a set of natural terrain bits to help you set your miniatures in a perilous natural environment. There are some rock walls and fallen logs for figures to take cover behind and stand proudly on. Also included are some small bits for adding some natural details to your minis' bases, and spooky trees for blocking line of sight. All these bits are perfect for scatter, and if you arrange these parts in a circle, you can make some very ominous pools of water. This set was designed by us and is available at EonsOfBattle.com. Finally, it's time for the bolters. I grabbed some noble skin and glazed this on. This is a warmer black, and that warmth will hopefully help to separate these weapons from the rest of the paint job. Then to finish them, I gave each one a dusting of some plate armor metallics. At long last, I can assemble my sisters. I glued the backpacks into place. I probably should have mixed up some epoxy, but I'm feeling a little lazy. And I did clean them down to the bare metal, so I think this will be plenty strong enough. Now for the bases. I want to put away the nice attractive palette and break out the grime. I glazed Tundra Taupe all over the sand, and I used some Blancheberry to add a rusty tinge to the metal sheets. Then I dry brushed the bases with Dusty Skull. This color is only a little lighter than the base coat. I actually want less contrast on the bases. I want the color and texture difference to be the thing that separates my minis. Then for the metal, I put some Dirty Down Rust, the best rust in the biz, and once that was dry, I dry brushed a little bit more plate armor over the metal to bring out the texture of the diamond plate. Finally, my minis were done. And in terms of the base rims, black is the obvious choice, but I'm feeling brown. Historically, the base rims in 1998 would have been Goblin Green. The brown base rim was more of a 4th, 5th edition thing, but I think it'll look really good on these Battle Sisters. Honestly, these didn't feel like Old Hammer models painting them up. They were really fun. These guys are awesome, and I totally see why Sisters of Battle remained an incredibly popular Warhammer faction through like 22 years of no updates to speak of. I picked 5 Battle Sisters as a tasting of what the old Sororitas range is like, and I really liked it. The Order of the Sacred Rose is a really fun color scheme to paint these models up in. The Order of the Sacred Rose has been doing a good job in modern Warhammer 40,000, the era Indomitus. They're stuck in Imperium Secundus, which is the half of the galaxy that's completely cut off from Terra and the Emperor's Light. But somehow, through sheer devotion and zealotry, they're able to navigate this alien demon landscape, and they're able to pop up wherever they're needed and bring their bolters and flamers to bear. Now, when they get there, they often save the day in very Sisters of Battle fashion, where they kill all the bad guys, and then half of the good guys because they weren't praying hard enough. But that's the fun of the Sisters of Battle. I've always had a soft spot for them because they're basically the Black Templars. They share very similar lore. I really had fun painting these models up, and I want to paint some more. I've got some other flavors of Metal Adeptus Sororitas, and I think something that could really tie this all together is a little Sororitas Rhino. I actually have a bunch of old school rhinos, and not even the OG plastic rhino, the original plastic rhino, the one that's made of like cheese-colored plastic. And I would love to put one together in Adeptus Sororitas fashion. Let me know in the comments below, how do you guys think that these minis turned out? I have seen these old metal retro models so many times, but I've never seen them look like this. They really can clean up nice. And I can't wait to see what they all look like done. It's gonna take a hot minute, but I'm ready for it. Thanks for watching.